We're all taught the same thing, right? Work hard, be ambitious, and you'll succeed. But what if that's all wrong? What if that intense striving, that hustle that our whole society seems to celebrate, is actually a really dangerous trap? Today, we're going to unpack that exact idea. And just so you know, all the articles and concepts we're discussing are sourced from the author Shu Feng of Life Chanuan. So, the source for this kicks off with this really punchy statement. It basically says that when we're constantly struggling and striving, we're not freeing ourselves. We're actually putting a yoke on our own necks, like an ox pulling a plow. It's a heavy, powerful image, and it really sets the stage for a completely different way of looking at what success even means. To make this idea really hit home, the author starts with a story that feels all too real for so many people. It's about the dream of owning a home and how that dream can go so wrong. Okay, so imagine this family. For 15 years, they did everything right. They worked hard, they sacrificed, they saved up every single cent they could, and they finally do it. They buy their dream house for $5 million. They put $3 million of their own hard-earned cash down and take on a $2 million loan. This is it. This is the moment they worked their whole lives for. But then, bam, disaster strikes. The economy takes a nosedive and the value of their beautiful home gets chopped in half. It's suddenly only worth 2.5 million. And to make things 1,000 times worse, they lose their jobs, so there's no way to pay the mortgage. Everything they built is just crumbling. So the bank forecloses. The house goes to auction, and after paying off the rest of the loan and all the fees, what are they left with? A measly 400,000. Their dream home is gone, and their entire life savings pretty much vanished along with it. And this just perfectly illustrates the author's point. Let's do the math here. A decade and a half of their lives, all that intense effort, didn't lead to security or happiness. It led to a devastating $2.6 million loss. So you have to ask, was all that striving really worth it? Maybe the goal itself was the trap all along. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's just one unlucky story. But here's the thing. The source argues this isn't about bad luck. It's part of a much bigger, much more disturbing pattern. And ironically, it's often the people who seem the most successful who end up falling the hardest. The author points to some really grim real-world examples. Think about it. We hear about billionaire entrepreneurs who end up murdered or, tragically, take their own lives. We see high-ranking officials, hundreds of thousands of them, who climb the ladder of power only to end up in prison. And then there are these brilliant PhD students who, after years of grueling academic work, end their own lives. Right? This is the huge question the author wants us to ask. These people made it. They got the wealth, the power, the prestige that everyone else is chasing. They won the game. So why did it end in absolute tragedy? This is what pushes us to look for the root cause. And the author has a name for it, the yoke of striving. The idea here is that the problem isn't effort. Effort is good. The problem is blind effort. It's ambition without a compass. It's just driving forward, full speed ahead, without any clear, thought-out purpose. And eventually, that drive becomes a crushing weight. And here's where the idea gets even more chilling. The author argues that these big, public stories of ruin and death we hear about, they're just the tip of the iceberg. For every one of those spectacular falls from grace, there's a huge, invisible population of people suffering in silence. So picture an iceberg. That tiny little tip sticking out of the water represents the public tragedies we see on the news. But according to the author, the massive, hidden part of the iceberg beneath the surface is all the other suffering caused by this yoke of striving. It's the constant anxiety, the crippling depression, the total burnout, the physical sickness, all that stuff that comes from a life of just directionless struggle. Okay, so if blindly grinding away is the problem, what's the fix? Well, the author proposes the answer isn't to work harder, but to think deeper. And that brings us to the most important part, asking the right questions before you even start striving. The source suggests we have to stop and ask ourselves these really big, fundamental questions. I mean, they're not small. They're the foundation of everything. The author's point is that if you pour your life into a goal without answering these first, it's like furiously climbing a ladder for 20 years, only to get to the top and realize it was leaning against the wrong wall the whole time. So this really breaks it down into two paths you can take. On one side, you've got blind striving. It's chaotic, you're just kind of stumbling through life, and it often ends badly. On the other side is what the author calls the way of nature, which is a life guided by a clear philosophy. You know why you're doing what you're doing. Action comes after intention. And this, right here, is the core takeaway. The author is not saying don't work hard or don't have goals, not at all. They're arguing for a total reordering of our priorities. Before you pour all of your life's energy into that climb, first, figure out your philosophy, figure out your why. Make sure that ladder is on the right wall. Then you act. So we end with the author's final, powerful question, which I'll turn over to you. As you go about your day, your work, your ambitions, just take a second to ask yourself, is all this striving I'm doing a path to real freedom and fulfillment? Or is it possible that without even realizing it, I'm just putting another set of shackles on myself? A pretty profound thought to end on.